also got it lucky, don't they, Mom?
Why do you say that?
Well, they don't have to be smart. They don't have to get jobs or anything. All they gotta do is get married.
Well, Beaver, being smart isn't exactly a drawback to marriage.
Well, if they don't get married, well, they can become dressmakers or cut people's nails in a barber shop or take care of kids and a lot of other dumb stuff.
Well, Beaver, today girls can be doctors and lawyers, too, you know. They're just as ambitious as boys are.
Gender roles are changing every day in our society. Women used to always stay at home, cook, clean, and take care of the kids. But today, women are doctors, lawyers, CEOs, teachers, engineers, business owners. The possibilities are endless. However, women are paid substantially less in almost every job. Despite years of change in federal laws, women still make approximately 79 cents to a man's dollar.
Okay, a wage gap is something that is a gap between you and your money and the person, and something how your wage will be if you have a gap between what you're paying for.
A wage gap is the difference between pay.
A wage gap is when a certain group of people and another certain group of people don't make the same.
So it's a difference of salary between two different groups.
A wage gap is the difference between the genders, between male and female, for the same job. I've personally seen that. Me and a friend, we went out for a job, a nursing job, and we have the same qualifications, the same education, the same years of nursing, and he was offered $30,000 more than I was. You could say it because he was a male, maybe he was stronger, maybe I'm not sure, but I do know that he walked away with quite a bit more money than I did. And I've seen it before in nursing. So, yeah, I tend to think that although maybe the gap is getting smaller, we definitely have to work on that gap.
A gender wage gap, right? So the gender wage gap, we're talking about the difference in wages between men and women. The question that you have on here is, why do you think there's a wage gap? Is it solely based off discrimination? I think the biggest wage gap right now that we talk about is something that a lot of people call the human capital argument. And what they're arguing is the amount of human capital that people have, so experience and education. And so is it solely based off discrimination? I don't think it's solely based off discrimination. I think the problem is that discrimination, I think it's based more off society, right? And what society kind of gears certain genders towards, right? Career paths for certain genders, educational paths that each people have, things like that. So schools, society, promotions, things like that.
In 1963, the U.S. government passed the Equal Pay Act. Its goal was to close the pay gap between men and women. However, there is still a wage disparity based upon sex. Many people have forgotten this act since it is loosely enforced and are now unaware of the gender wage gap, especially those who are unaffected by it.
Nobody makes the same pay as everybody else. There's a gap between everyone. Do I think it's worse between genders? No, probably not.
Yes, I think genders will affect wage gaps because certain males do labor and women are more in a store. So I think, yeah, it could affect in a way. I think it just depends who will make more money. If you work in a construction area, it just depends what company you work for. And it really doesn't matter. It just whoever has that job. I would say that maybe women would make more, but it just depends what job you hold.
Women totally make less because the patriarchy.
According to the cult of domesticity established in the 19th century, women were meant to stay at home and their only job was to be a good wife and mother. It was believed that they were incapable of doing anything outside the home, like having a job or getting involved with politics. Although in today's society women are allowed to work, They are still seen as being less capable than the men, and therefore have to work harder just to earn an equal salary.
I think women should be working because when women work, it's more easier on the man's level. But if you are pregnant or if you have a newborn, I think it's appropriate to stay home.
There's no reason why a woman can't go to work. If she's like married or in a really committed relationship and she wants to be a stay-at-home mom, fine, but she should have that choice. And if she works, she shouldn't have to work for less money than a man would.
Should women work or be home with the kids? This one's kind of means a lot to me because there's nothing wrong with the female working. I mean, sometimes we just have to. I think it would be a stronger world if the mom was able to stay home with her children. I think the kids would grow up stronger. I don't think that's in every situation how it is, but I think in most situations, I think it would always benefit us to have someone taking care of the family and being there. I've seen it. I had 7 kids. I was able to stay home with the first 4, and it was a huge difference, you know. And I've seen it in other families, and I've seen people today stay home with their children, and they do sacrifice some things. Kids may not be in every sport, but that does not make the kids any less. The kids may not have the best, but they're still okay. And yes, 100%, if all possible, I think the mom or the dad, someone staying home with the kids would make a stronger family.
The pay gap has barely budged in a decade. At the current rate, the gap won't close for more than 100 years. Think 79 cents is bad? The pay gap is worse for women of color. The gender wage gap is worse for mothers, and it only grows with age. There's no silver bullet to solve the gender pay gap. More education helps increase women's earnings, but it still does not close the gender pay gap. Thanks to the pay gap, women struggle to pay off student loan debt even more than men do.
So should the U.S. be putting more emphasis on closing the gap? That's a difficult question, right? Because we have to first quantify how much is the U.S. putting an emphasis on it now. So I don't know how much the U.S. is putting on it now. I don't know who is going to be ultimately responsible for that. So I think that needs to be more specific as far as like, should individuals be more concerned about it? Should the education system be more concerned about it? You know, who exactly should be focusing on? And I think one way that is being emphasized, or one way that could help close this educational gap, is in schools and is in education systems as they grow up. And so if we can focus more elementary age kids to be, especially both boys and girls, to get focused into math and get focused into science and so focused into reading and things like that, I think that's going to help change a lot. So at the end of the day, I think what it's going to come down to is emphasizing education from all sorts of age groups. Right?
Many times, men and women will have the same education, yet women will still be offered less pay. This happens in almost every occupation, but is worse in some workplaces. The public sector has less disparity than the private sector, however, it is still an issue. In addition to the field of work, the state in which a woman lives and her ethnicity will also have a great effect on the wage gap.
Do I think women work just as hard as men? I think that depends on the job, and I think that depends on the situation. I work in a profession, nursing, that men and women have the exact same duties in their job description. So I've seen it both ways. I mean, I think if I were to say, it would probably more likely be prejudice. I have seen a lot of nurses during school that were not good to men, and therefore they had to work harder. So I have seen that. And I've seen men in the nursing situation that don't care about the little things that women care about. I don't think that's a sexist thing. I just think it's just natural. And I see men working harder at some areas that women don't. So I don't think it's a one for all. I think that there's some situations, because we're not the same. We are different. We just are.
I think women doesn't work hard as men, not to be sexist, but I don't think they really do because of the things that we do as for all of the labor that we do and the construction that we do. And women, they just pretty much do, paperwork. And there are some women that does do construction, but I think we do work harder in some areas, a lot better.
Men work as hard as men. I love to say the answer is yes. Because it depends on certain jobs. You have some women in the armed forces trying to defend our rights, but you got some men just flipping burgers. So I think women in the army are doing the same amount of work as men, but it depends on the type of job.
Yes, they work just as hard.
Totally. We even work harder sometimes. Shoot, do men have to go through childbirth? No.
We live in a patriarchal society where the men have always held the power. But does that mean that the men are to blame for the issue?
I think it started when women came in the workforce, a lot because of experience, right? So in the 60s through the 80s, women started to get more jobs and have more experience. But ever since the 80s, the late 90s, there's been a trend towards more women going to college. So I think over time, that will start to change. But a lot of it had to do with just, I think that human capital argument is what I would say the biggest issue was, right? Women being looked at to take care of the homes. When they got married, they would generally get out of the workforce, and so therefore wages would always be lower because of that.
The gender wage gap is an issue that is directly affecting the women. They are working as hard as the men, doing the exact same job, yet somehow end up with way less money. How is this going to be cast on to all of society? Who else will be hurt by the gap?
I think, no, the problem probably wouldn't go away, but then again, I don't know. The shape that the economy is in, like I said before, it all depends on what job you have and how much money you make on that job. And it depends if you have the knowledge to work it. So will it change? I'm not sure.
Yes, I think it'll have a lasting effect on our society because it affects women and how much money they make and how they can live.
I think it would have a lasting effect on our society because it's just one way people try to make it seem like women are inferior or not equal.
I do think the gender gap can make a difference on our society. First of all, there's a lot more women in the working force. I personally would prefer to be home raising my kids, but it's just not something I can do. So therefore, I have to pay for the house, pay for the clothes, pay for the food just as much if it were male. And I don't see that I'm always making as much. So yeah, I think it does make a difference. I don't think that's in every situation. I'm sure there's plenty of situations where it does get the same. I have just seen otherwise. And I do see that women are struggling more than men. I'm not sure why. I just know I do see it.
How does this affect our society? Will it hurt? I don't know if I think it affects our society greatly, right? It affects the amount of income individual families have to not only care for themselves, but also care for their offspring, right? So if women and men don't make the same amount of money, then families don't make as much money as they could. And so families aren't able to help their kids as much as they want or as much as they could. And so I think from the short term, I think that's part of the problem. But even greater than that, I think the biggest problem is going to be later in life, future generations, right? Because if women aren't making enough money to properly care for themselves in retirement, right? If there's a big gap between men and women, then women will have to rely on the working age people more, right? So elderly women are going to be more of a burden for society because they didn't make as much money in the past.